Just a little lesson on freelance integrity. And I'm just going to assume that the audience of people that I'm talking to here is very ethical. This is just to help you understand where we're coming from as medical writers because we're by ourselves all day long. And really, what we have to rely on is our own inner voice more than anything else. There's nobody telling us exactly what to do. Probably most of the mistakes we make as medical writers won't even get picked up. And I'm not really talking about copy editing. I'm talking about, when it comes to fact checking everything, often pieces do go through a fact check, but many times they don't. So it's really, really all on us. So just to cite the AMWA Code of Ethics, you can go to this website here and look at the entire Code of Ethics. But one of the things here in Principle 3, buried in Principle 3, is that medical writers need to attempt to prevent the perpetuation of incorrect information. We should never write something that we know to be inaccurate or a slanting of the truth. And we certainly want to make sure that everything that we write is as correct as we can make it be. Because again, we're the last frontier when it comes to that. We need to spend the time and energy it takes to make sure that what we're writing is correct. We need to look things up. We need to make sure we understand what we're writing about. Accuracy and honest representation. Many of the mistakes that we might make just come from inexperience or not really thinking things through. But we want to make sure that to the best of our ability, we're interpreting and presenting study findings accurately. And one of the ways to do that is to avoid exaggerating results or selectively reporting only positive data or data that fits with the story that you're trying to tell. One example of that is, you really should always include adverse events that come with a drug. Like if a drug's effective, you can't just talk about the efficacy. You should also include the adverse events. You don't have to add opinions or judgment statements, but you do have to present the facts. When you're writing, you can avoid loaded words like struggled with, admitted. When you're writing about science in particular, things tend to be factual. Regardless of what anybody wants to say, there are facts and then there are things that are not facts. There are gray areas in science where we just don't know. And that's a fact too, that we just don't know. Just be really sort of factual and literal in your writing and make sure that nothing can be misconstrued. If necessary, when you're writing a piece, even about a scientific topic or a feature article, something like that, it's a good idea to include dissenting viewpoints or even an independent viewpoint. I did a lot of writing for Medscape News. They required an interview with a study author and then also an independent expert in the field that wasn't related to that research. And I just thought that always presented a very well grounded piece of writing. So that's what a good example of that is. Listen to your inner voice. You might not have much of an inner voice when you first start out, or you're just trying to get through the project, and that's fine. But over time, when you've done this a while, you'll have a nagging doubt that crops up. You want to pay attention to that voice. So I wrote this statement, and is that really accurate, or is that really true? I'm under this deadline. I don't really feel like looking it up, but no, you really do need to make sure and look that up, even if it's going to take a few more minutes. Always verify and correct uncertainties as you go along rather than ignore them. When you get to the end of a piece, you're going to want to just get that puppy off your plate and send it on to the client. You're not going to feel like coming back to any uncertainties. You're not going to feel like coming back to those and researching those. So it's really important to do it as you go along. It slows you down when you do it like that, but it's okay because you will not skip over it later. And then don't write anything that isn't true, obviously, or that you haven't confirmed to be true, or anything that you don't understand. Staying focused and professional, of course, you want to ensure good sleep. Sometimes medical writing can be a bit tedious. I found it's a very good way to just quickly induce a nap sometimes. So if you are tired, it takes care of itself. Nutrition, you've got to do what makes you feel energized and healthy. And then a distraction-free environment. It's not reasonable to expect yourself to, if you have young kids, to be able to work in the same room as those kids, even if they're temporarily looking at the TV. It doesn't stay like that, right? So you have to make some kind of arrangements. When I worked at home and had a young kid. She's all grown up now, but when she was young, I made good money as a medical writer, so I was able to afford somebody to come to the house between 7 and 3 PM. My husband at the time was at work. I was also at work in my office, but my child was with somebody that was hanging out with her, so that's what had to happen because otherwise, you're just going to be interrupted. You're going to make mistakes that you don't wanna make. You can work in a coffee shop, but I mean, for me, I have to have some music on or something to block out any noise, so try to bring your best self to each project, and if you are not enthusiastic about a project, try to identify why that is. Has the client not given you enough information? Is there a big feeling of impending doom? Is this something that maybe that you're not necessarily qualified to do? Try to identify whatever that is because you want to approach each project with excellence and enthusiasm. If you're not able to do a project in an excellent way, then it's probably not the right project for you. Okay. And everybody has projects that they're not going to do really well. I can name a few types of writing that I would not excel at. And excellence and enthusiasm happens to be our values standards at nascent. I would recommend those 2 adjectives or whatever works for you, but try to have your own standards for how you're going to approach each project. Avoiding plagiarism and self-plagiarism, you want to reword and restructure content thoroughly. Of course, we have a basic level of ethics where we're not going to knowingly plagiarize somebody's work, but it can happen accidentally, and you need to make sure that it doesn't happen, have a system, and make sure that you don't plagiarize anybody's work unknowingly. And then sometimes you'll find yourself in a situation where you're writing about the same topic, and it might actually even be the same request from 2 different clients. We get this sometimes with needs assessments where there's a request for proposals out by a big pharma company, and we'll have a couple of clients that will ask for the exact same work. You want to, of course, avoid, submitting the same work, um, to 2 different clients because actually with these assessments, it's gonna end up probably in front of the same person, and, that would be bad if that was identified. So there's ways to adjust. You want to make sure you use different references, spend several hours changing things up, not just a few minutes, obviously, to try to make sure that you don't plagiarize and just be really careful because you do not want that kind of situation to happen. AI ethics is constantly evolving. At the time of this recording, now it's kind of foolish if you don't use AI in medical writing. But you want to recognize AI as a tool, not to be relied upon for all things. And if you are reading your writing and it doesn't sound like you, it sounds like it came out of AI, just be aware that other people are going to see it that way and just really be careful. I talk about this in the use of AI section. Managing deadlines effectively, it's really important to strive to meet 100% of your deadlines. Of course, stuff happens. You want to be realistic about your workload and say no when you need to say no. A really good thing to do that I got this process in place when I too was starting to miss deadlines. But one of the things to do is when you get a new project, take a few minutes, 15 minutes, even if you're really busy, take that with the new project, review the files, make sure you have all the information, make sure that you have any missing information, and make sure you understand the real needs of the project. Because what can happen is that you have a project, it's on the back burner because you're working on other things and you think, "Oh, I'll just get to that Tuesday and Wednesday of next week," and then it comes to be Tuesday of next week, and you see that the project included things that you really needed to understand or whatever, so you hadn't judged it. So if you can just take those project files, look at them early, make sure you understand, then you can continue on with what you're working with and still have an understanding about the new project. That really helps you meet the deadlines. If you can't meet all your deadlines, which you really want to meet all your deadlines, but sometimes you can prioritize urgent assignments over flexible ones. If you work for nascent, I would really love it if you would just come to us because we have our own priorities and we understand how clients are going to view deadlines, perhaps with a little bigger picture than our individual writers. So we want you to come to us if you can't meet a deadline. And the sooner that you do that, the better. You want to inform clients immediately if a delay becomes likely. And then end of day can mean end of business day, or it can mean like midnight Eastern time, or it can mean it just has to be waiting for the client the next morning, and you can work on it overnight if you have to, right? You don't want to do that, but if you have to do that, you can. So that's always good to clarify that because you want to manage the client's expectations. And then representing your qualifications, you shouldn't obviously say you have a lot of experience in a certain area if you don't. But sometimes clients have unreasonable expectations about the level of experience you need in a topic to write about it because any intelligent medical writer can search the literature for a couple of hours and can be up and running in an area. So it is acceptable, I believe, to say that you're comfortable writing on a new topic after researching it to educate clients that good medical writers can adapt to new subjects. Sometimes they don't believe you, but that's okay. Billing and invoices best practices. I'll talk more about invoicing and all of that in week 6, but it is preferable to have a project-based billing. So that's like a grand total amount. I'm going to charge $2,000 for this project. Or you can have maximum hours. So I'm going to charge $100 an hour, but it's going to be 20 hours max. So there's a max of $2,000, right? And then do track your time spent if you're working hourly so that this will help you estimate future projects accurately. And I don't know about you, but when I'm writing, sometimes I lose all sense of time. And so the only way I really understand how much time I've spent on a project is to actually write it down. I have a little spreadsheet just for that purpose. There are programs that you can use. Rescue Time is one of them that will help with that. But I really just prefer just to say, okay, I'm going to work from 12 to 4 on this, and I write it on the spreadsheet, and I just keep that updated as I'm working on a project. You really want to avoid padding hours in any way. If something takes you less time than you thought it would, go ahead and bill for less time. And then just try to, really keep tabs on the amount of time you spend. You want to have a nice balance between doing really good work and not spending too long on that really good work. So that's the sweet spot. So if you're going to be in this career for the long term, it's a very small medical writing world. And I'm very proud of the fact that Nascent has been around since 2015 in its current form. We don't do all that much marketing. I guess I'm not proud of that. But what I am proud of is the word of mouth and the amazing writers that we have working for us that have this sort of freelance integrity, because really that's what it's all about. Word of mouth is going to get you much further than anything else in this field.